and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're actually going to look at Rashi this morning. I realized that we actually did not get through all of Parshat Bereshit with the Rashi. And so I'm going to continue where we left off with the Rashi, even though with Torah Tamima we've gotten quite far and almost to the end of that entire Parsha. So, okay. So here we go. Let me get on the share. See where it is. Here it is. And hopefully you're getting to see it. All right, here we are. We are actually on the fourth day. We're still in chapter one with the Rashi. And the part of the reason for that is because, of course, we're in Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and we still have to finish up Deuteronomy, which we'll do on Simchat Torah. But then pretty much the very next day is Shabbat, so the very next day is Bereshit. We'd have no time to really do this during the week if I was following that. So here we are, fourth day, right? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. Vayome Elohim. So God said, Yehi me'orot, let there be luminaries, Birkia Hashamayim, in the firmament of heaven. Lahavdil, to make a distinction, Bein Hayom uvein Halayla, between the day and between the night. Vahiula otot, and they shall be for signs, ulamoadim, and for appointed seasons, in other words, the festivals. Uleyamim uveshanim, and for days and for years. So let's take a look at Rashi on this. Yehi morot, right? Let there be luminaries, etc. So this is what he tells us. Miyom rishon nivra'u. They were actually all created on the first day, on the very first day of creation, where all these luminaries, everything was actually created in potential on the first day of creation. Uva revi'i, but on the fourth day, tiva alehem litlot berkia. It was then that he commanded that they be hung, suspended in the heavens. So they'd been created, but the commandment to do this actually was on the fourth day. That is, that they should actually come into that position, assume their positions. V'chein kol dot shamayim v'aretz. And he says, not just the luminaries, but all the generations of heaven and earth should be done like that. Okay. If you are not muted, please consider muting because I can hear this feedback going on right now. Okay.
That was me, sorry.
Okay, no problem. And of course, if you have a question, just, by all means, unmute or raise your hand and I'll be happy to recognize you. All right. Let's see here. Right. Right. Nivra'u b'yom rishon, and they were all created on the very first day, right? Uvechol echad ve'echad, and every single one then was nikba b'yom shenigzar alav, was then established on the day that it was commanded to do so. Hu shaktov, what proof do we have? Hu shekatuv, because it says et hashamayim, because at the very beginning where it says God created, right, when God began to create the heavens and the earth, it says et hashamayim. So the word et, right, the heavens, l'rabot toldotehem, that is that the et is understood to mean to include something, and that would conclude all their generations is what that means. Ve'et haaretz, and it says, remember, ve'et hashamayim, ve'et haaretz, lerabot toldoteha, to make sure that all the various elements of the earth were also included. Now he says, Yehim orot, let there be luminaries. And we notice that when it says Yehim orot, here it is in the text itself, notice that there's no vav between the aleph and the resh, even though it's Yehim orot. Okay, or there's no vav between the resh and the taf, right? Either way. Chaser vav. So he says it's lacking a vav. At least one would think there would be a vav, I believe he's saying, between the aleph and the resh. Uh, Ketiv, okay, chaser vav ketiv. It is written, even though it's pronounced with the vav, with the or sound, it is not written that way. Ketiv al shehu yom me'era. The reason is that this fourth day, there's a certain curse associated with this day, and the word me'era means curse. Lipol askara betinokot. In other words, it is on this day that little babies develop croup. Now, this is just one of those things that either has a deeper meaning to it or has more of a literary meaning behind it. I do not claim to understand uh, the deeper meaning here, is such as it may well be. But this is what's associated with the fourth day, with Wednesdays. And I do not know, I'm not sure exactly what we are really dealing with here. But he does go on to give the he goes on to explain. Hu shishaninu ba'arba'ah. He says that which we have learned, right? We have learned ba'arba'ah on the fourth day, in other words, Wednesday. Hayu mitanim al iskara. They would fast for the disease of iskara. So one thing that we do know from people who were very, very, very deeply observant, very spiritual, practically to a mystical level, that there were times when they would fast to try and repair the world. And we talk about the word tikkun, and the word tikkun is a mystical concept, and the idea that there is a level of let's say, purpose for human beings to complement God's creation and to try and actually repair elements in creation that were created initially to give human beings that ability, this ability to act as and have the significance of repairing these particular elements in creation, right? So, mitanim al iskara shelot tipol betinokot, so that it should not fall, literally fall in on infants. So they would fast for this. And I'm sure there's a lot more that can be said about this, but at least this is the basic idea. So going on, lahavdil ben hayom uvein laila, in these luminaries were created to make a distinction between the day and between the night. So going on, Mishin nignaz haor harishon. Once that primal light was hidden away. Remember, we talked about that first Yehi Or on the first day, and we understood that it was the kind of light they describe as one could see from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe. And I suspect that we're talking about the light of understanding, the light of deep, deep awareness of the very nature of the universe. And you may recollect that when God saw that wicked people would take advantage of it, God took it away and hid it for the righteous in the next world. So he's saying when that initial light was hidden away, right? So that's why these particular luminaries were created. That is, the sun, the moon, and the stars were created once the primal light had been hidden away. Aval, but he goes on to say, again, this is all very suggestive material. Aval b'shiv'at yemei bereshit, but he says during those initial 7 days of creation, shimshu ha'or v'ha'choshech harishonim, that initial light and darkness were actually operating those first 7 days. So if we wonder, how was there light in the world if the sun, moon, and stars were only created on the fourth day? That is because they were simply put in place. But in terms of light and darkness, the initial light and darkness operated during those entire first 7 days of creation. And the truth is, of course, this also would indicate that those first 7 days when the world was coming into existence were sui generis. They were one of a kind, not like the rest of the um, time that took place since the world was created. So, Yachad, that is the light, that initial light, that primal light and darkness. We're serving, we're operating Yachad together, Bein Bayom Uvein Balayla, whether during the day or whether during the night. So again, this initial light and darkness had to be a different kind of light and darkness than is provided by the sun, etc. So going on, v'hayula otot, and they shall be for signs, for signs. Keshehamorot lokin. He says that when these luminaries are eclipsed, that's Sfaria's translation, siman rahu laolam. It's a bad sign for the world. So there is this belief, right, that there is a connection with what goes on in the heavens. There is a belief here that there are signs to be seen. The difference is this. You were going to see in a second. So I'm going to let it keep going. Shine Emar, because it states, and this is in Jeremiah, Me otot hashamayim al techtau, or techtu, techtu, or techetu. He says, from the signs of the heavens. So there's that otot, right? The signs of the heavens. Do not fear. So they are there to be feared, but you don't have to fear them. Ba'asotchem ritzon hakadosh baruch hu. If in fact you are performing the will of the Holy One, blessed be He. Einatim tzrichim lidog min hapuranut. You have no need to be afraid of retribution. So the distinction is this, that while there is a belief in a connection between human experience and the heavenly signs, and you know that there are many cultures to this day that take that quite seriously, even though in Western civilization we don't see a connection in the kind of way that we're discussing here. The difference is this, is that ultimately these are all in God's hands. So that if one has a connection to the divine, you don't have to worry about the fact that these kinds of things are built into the natural order. So that's sort of a distinction between the way we tend to think of it, using what we consider to be a scientific approach to the world. But the fact is that there are some very significant civilizations that still hold on to these kinds of things. And whether or not it's valid, that's, a personal decision going on. So, but at least according to Rashi and according to traditional interpretation, that is one of the purposes of these luminaries, etc. So, Ula Mu'adim. So Mu'adim, actually, I think it refers to the festivals, right? The appointed seasons. Al Shem Ha'atid, this is actually a reference to the future, right? She'atidim Yisrael, that in the future, the Jewish people, Lihitstavot al Hamuadot, they would be commanded concerning the appointed seasons, the festivals, Vahem Nimnim Lemolad Halavana, and to calculate when these seasons take place, they are connected to the new moon. Right? We know that we have this luni-solar calendar and that the days of the month are based on when the new moon falls. Going on. So, V'layamim, and for the days, Shimush Hachama Chatziyom, he says the sun serves for half a day, V'shimush Halavana Chetzio, and he says, and also the service of the moon is for half a day, Hare Yom Shalem, and two halves, of course, make a whole day. So that's the Yamim, the sun and the moon, Vishanim, and for years, Lasof Shin Samach, sorry, let me make sure. Yeah, Shin Samach He Yamim. So he says, at the end of 365 days. Sfarim Acherim, there are other manuscripts that have Urevia Yom and a quarter day. Of course, the awareness that the year is approximately 365 and a quarter days is part of the Julian calendar, was known for a long, long time. And of course, the Gregorian calendar, named after Pope Gregory, took into account the fact that it isn't quite 365 and a quarter days. And so, in order to make sure that the seasons fall properly, you have to make sure that you're as accurate as possible. And for that reason, I believe at the centuries, there is no leap year, but at the millennium, there is a leap year. The and that's how you make the corrections for this slight discrepancy of 365 and a quarter days. So at least at the end of 365 and a quarter days, Yigmaru Mahalachan, their journey is complete, Beyud Mazalot, through the 12 signs of the zodiac. And that is that, of course, that is where the sun is against the background of the fixed stars. Basically, it's called in astronomy the ecliptic. And that is because that is where eclipses will take place if they're lined up properly. But there is this path in which the sun travels against the background of fixed stars, and in the course of 12 months, it goes through these 12 constellations. Hamishartim Otam, which serve them, in other words, these 12 signs of the zodiac, that's 12 specific stellar constellations that he's using the term serve the sun and the moon. Vahu Shana, and that is how you know a year has passed by. Again, Sfarim Acherim, other manuscripts. Vahu, this is instead of sense, it's Vahu Shisa Yom Revia Yom, and this is again 365 days and a quarter days. V'chozrim umetchilim pam shnia, and then they repeat that journey. They go through those 12 constellations again, the Saviv Bagagal, to go around in the cycle, Kamahalachan Harishon, just like they did the first time they went around and against the background of these fixed stars. Going on. Vahayu lema'orot pirkei hashamayim, they should serve as luminaries in the heavens, the ha'ir al ha'aretz vahichein, so as to shed light on the earth, and so it was. And here we are. Vahayu lema'orot, they shall serve as luminaries. Od zot yishamshu. So again, we already know of two different ways in which they were serving, and there is still another way. Od zot, this too, yishamshu, that is, they should serve in this capacity as well. Shia'iru la'olam, that they should give light to the world, to the world. Vayas Elohim et shnei ha'ma'orot hagdolim, and the Lord made, or rather God made, the two large luminaries. Now the word shnayim, when used, because if he said et ha'ma'orot, you know that in Jewish interpretation and biblical interpretation, when we just see a plural, right, we assume it's the smallest plural there is. If it's a larger plural, then it should have a number associated with it. However, since we would assume already, if it said ha'ma'orot, that it would mean two ma'orot, so adding the word shnei, since we understand from ma'orot it means two anyway, the shnei means of equal size. That's how it would be understood, and that's going to give rise to this comment that is somewhat well known. Maybe you know it already. Did you want to say something? Okay, let me keep going. So here we go. Hamorot Hagdolim, the large luminaries. Shavim Nivra'u. The point is, you see, so that they were created the same size. They were originally created the same size. And again, this is just We need to understand this is not a scientific description of creation. I think when we understand it as a literary description of creation, that is taking into account many other factors besides the physical factors. So, and that's why it's being described this way, because there's some important lessons to be learned from the way this story is spelled out. So, Shavim Nivra'u, they were originally created in equal size. The sun and the moon were of equal dimension. V'nitma'ata halavana, but the moon was reduced, right? She reduced in size. Why? Why was she reduced in size? Al shekitraga, because she complained. She had a complaint. V'amra, and she said, If shar lishnei malachim, it is impossible for two kings, sheyishtamshu beketer echad, right? With one crown, right? It's not right for two kings to rule with one crown. And actually, that is a true statement, right? I mean, you don't need one leader undermining the other leader in any kind of way. And if you have a leader, they need to have that authority. But she complained. She complained. And she was complaining against God, who initially created them together. Again, not this is not a scientific description. It is a story. It is a story. Ve'et hakochavim, and the stars as well. So, because it says he created the moon and the stars. Right. So, al yedei shemi'et et halavana, hirba tzva'eha la fistata. So because God reduced the moon, he multiplied her host, in other words, the ones who accompanied her, lehafistata, in other words, to give her some, to appease her, to make her feel comfort, to comfort her. So there's some interesting dynamics going on here, right? That even though she was punished, the fact is that she wasn't simply punished, that there was at the same time a need for equity. And that is an interesting concept. That here in this particular narrative, then, we discover this concept of justice and equity, and trying to make sure that justice isn't just in a concentrated form without a sense of trying to make sure that justice can be accepted and that it is done in a way that is truly fair as much as possible. And that's sort of the idea of equity, is fairness going on, right? Uh, V'limshol bayom uvalayla, and to rule over the day and in the night, ulahavdil bein ha'or uvein ha'choshech, and to make a distinction between light and darkness. Vayar Elohim ki tov, and God saw that this was good. Vahi erev vahi boker yom revi'i. There was evening and there was morning, a fourth day. And we will stop here. I'll put my little mark here. And with God's help, we will also continue with this tomorrow. And I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to make. One thing I would like to point out is the nature of the world being binary. And we know how important the binary system is, and the fact that if the world didn't have at least this binary quality, it would make no sense at all whatsoever. And in some ways, this is setting up the whole notion of the binary nature of the world. And I will stop.
How do you mean
Yes.
binary nature? That there are two lights?
No, that there's light and there's darkness.
Oh, okay. A
There's
thing and its opposite, or
correct.
a
There's
thing
zero
and its
and one.
shadow.
Zero and one, right? that the idea is that the world presents choices. And they are, while I realize, and we saw, in fact, in the creation of the moon and the reduction, that it's not to say that things can't be shaded, but even so, there's essentially a choice to be made and a distinction between the way of light and the way of darkness. And that as human beings, we face this too. And that's something to give consideration to, that there is good and there's evil. And that's not to say that there isn't shading. There is shading, but nevertheless, it's still a matter of binary, and it's a binary thing. And with this, I will stop our recording. Thank you.